Millionaire bets on transforming an obese woman into a fashion icon and is surprised when Logan Anderson wasn't just a businessman. He was the architect of success in the fashion world, known for turning even the most ordinary people into shining stars on the runway. His tactics were ruthless, his sense of style, flawless. To him, everything was about image. In his world, appearance was power. At an informal meeting in the upscale restaurant of a five-star hotel, Logan sipped a glass of wine while his business associates discussed the brand's next project. Conversations about fashion and success no longer entertained him. He had already proven he could master anything in that universe. Then one of his friends challenged him. "Logan, you always talk about how you can transform anyone. But what if it was someone completely outside the norm, an obese woman? I bet even you would fail." Logan's eyes gleamed with a mix of amusement and challenge. He loved it when people questioned his abilities. "Name the person. Who do you think is impossible?" The friends laughed, but one of them pulled out his phone and started searching. After a few moments of exchanging knowing looks, he found the perfect profile. Grace Wilson, owner of a small bakery in Brooklyn, far from the glamorous fashion world. An obese woman with no intention of fitting into Logan's standards. "She's perfect," the friend said, showing the picture. "Grace Wilson, try transforming her and I'll give you $1 million. Logan looked at the image on the phone and, for a brief moment, felt a twinge of doubt. Grace seemed comfortable in her life, with no desire to change. He knew someone like that wouldn't be easy to convince, and that's what intrigued him the most. "I accept the bet," he replied with a cold smile. The next morning, Logan stormed into Grace's bakery. His expensive shoes echoed on the wooden floor as he crossed the small space, taking in the details of the place. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods didn't impress him. To him, it was too simple, lacking the sophistication he was used to. Grace, who was behind the counter, looked up. She didn't recognize him, but immediately felt that this man didn't belong in her world. There was something in his calculated manner that made her raise an internal barrier. "Can I help you?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron, a mix of curiosity and suspicion in her expression. Logan stared at her for a moment before speaking. "I didn't come here to buy a cake, Grace." She frowned. How did he know her name? "Then why are you here?" Logan approached slowly, like a predator studying its prey. "I came to make you an offer, something that could change your life." Grace crossed her arms, already on guard. "I'm not interested in changing my life. I'm happy with what I have." Logan's smile was more of a controlled smirk than a gesture of warmth. "Happy? Look around, Grace. Your bakery is dying. You might not admit it, but I know the business isn't doing well, and I can save it." The tension in the air thickened. Grace stood taller, feeling a mix of anger and discomfort. He was right. The bakery's finances were in critical condition. But who was he to show up and throw it in her face? "Who are you to tell me how my life is going? What do you really want?" Logan stepped closer, invading her personal space. "I want to transform you, and in return, I'll save your bakery. I'll make sure you succeed beyond anything you've ever imagined." Grace let out a nervous laugh, incredulous. "Transform? You've got to be kidding, right?" "No, I'm Logan Anderson. I do this all the time. I turn ordinary people into something extraordinary, and you will be my next creation. With my help, you won't just save your business, but you'll become a woman the world will notice." Grace looked him in the eye, defiant. "I'm not a project, Logan. And honestly, what makes you think I'd agree to something like this?" Logan knew this was the hardest part, convincing someone who clearly didn't want to change. But he also knew that everyone had a weak spot, and he would find hers. "Because you need to, Grace. Not for me, but for yourself. Your bakery is sinking. If you don't do something, you'll lose everything. I'm offering you a way out." Grace felt the weight of his words, but his arrogant tone irritated her deeply. "And what do you get out of this, huh? Why would someone like you care about a small neighborhood bakery?" Logan smiled, but this time there was something cold in his eyes. "Let's just say I like challenges, and transforming you will be my biggest one." Grace hesitated. She knew he was right about the financial situation, but there was something behind that offer, something he wasn't revealing. She could feel it. Even so, the need to save her bakery was overwhelming. "And if I agree, What happens? Logan handed her a contract with a quick, almost rehearsed move. You follow my process, and I guarantee your business will succeed. In a year, everything will be different. Grace took the paper but didn't read it right away. She knew she was signing more than just a business deal. She was stepping into a dangerous game with a man who seemed to have deep secrets. With one last look at the bakery, Grace signed the contract. As she did, Logan smiled to himself. He knew the game was just beginning, and what Grace didn't know was that this deal hid far more than she could ever imagine. The bakery was closed for the day, but Grace stayed at the counter, reading the contract again. The name Logan Anderson was no longer a mystery. After a quick online search, she found out he was one of the big names in fashion, someone who had nothing to do with the simple world she lived in. That only made her more suspicious. Why had he chosen her? And more importantly, what was the real reason behind his offer? The next day, Logan showed up at the bakery promptly at 8 a.m., as agreed. He arrived with an air of superiority that instantly irritated Grace. He wore a flawless suit, while she, still in her apron, didn't bother hiding her discomfort. "Ready to start?" he asked with fake friendliness. "Start what, exactly?" Grace shot back. "Because so far you haven't explained anything." Logan studied her for a moment, his eyes analyzing every aspect of her, from her posture to her tone of voice. "We'll start by transforming your image. Before anything else, you need to understand how the world sees you." Grace stepped closer to him, arms crossed, defensive. "And what do you think you know about how the world sees me? I know the world judges. I know it creates standards, and those who don't fit are ignored. My job is to make sure you're noticed." Grace laughed without humor. "Noticed? So you think I'm invisible?" Logan didn't back down. "Maybe not invisible, but certainly not on anyone important's radar. We're going to change that." The tension in the air was palpable. Grace was irritated by the cold, calculated way he spoke, as if her life was just another task on Logan's endless to-do list. Yet, part of her knew he was right. Her business was on the verge of collapse. Something had to change. "And what do you suggest? I should wear high heels while baking cupcakes?" Grace snapped, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Logan ignored her and picked up his phone, making a quick call. "We're ready. Come in." Minutes later, the bakery door opened and 3 people walked in, 2 stylists and an image consultant. They brought with them a rack of clothes and various makeup products. "This is ridiculous," Grace muttered, suddenly feeling exposed. Logan watched her, always paying attention to her reactions. "If you want your bakery to survive, you need to become part of the process. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect others to believe in your business?" His words hit her hard. Grace knew that, as insensitive as Logan was, he touched on a sensitive point, her lack of confidence. For a long time, she had avoided any kind of transformation, preferring to hide behind her perfect desserts. Now, it felt like he was forcing her to step out of the shadows. "Transformation goes beyond the physical," Logan continued, his tone softening slightly, but still firm. "I want you to see the potential inside you. We'll start on the outside, but the real work is internal." Grace shook her head, trying to keep her composure. "This isn't just about me, is it? There's something more behind this. I know you're not doing this because you care." Logan hesitated for a brief moment, but quickly regained his usual control. "I'm a businessman, Grace. Everything is an exchange. You'll gain something from this, and so will I. But that doesn't mean you can't benefit from this opportunity." "So that's it, isn't it?" Grace murmured, feeling anger bubbling inside her. "I'm just a project to you, a bet. What do you get in the end? Fame? Money? Or is it just personal satisfaction in proving you can change me?" For the first time, Logan showed slight hesitation. Grace had touched on something he didn't expect, that maybe he himself wasn't exactly sure why he was so determined to transform her. He blinked slowly, regaining his composure. "Don't worry about what I gain," he said, his voice more controlled. "The only thing that matters right now is what you can gain from this." Grace stared at him, her eyes fixed on his. Something inside her told her that Logan was hiding more than he admitted. He had secrets, and she was determined to uncover them. For now, though, she needed to play the game. "Fine," she said, sighing. "I'll go along with the process, but I'm not going to let you turn me into someone I'm not." Logan smiled, but there was no warmth in the gesture. "We'll see." As the stylists began measuring Grace and the image consultant assessed her options, Grace felt a growing tension. Logan had a reason for being there, and she knew that uncovering that secret would be essential to surviving what was coming. The following days were like a silent storm in Grace's life. The transformation had begun, and with it came countless clothing fittings, makeup adjustments, and worst of all, Logan's critical gaze. Every move he made seemed calculated, every word a sharp knife touching her deepest insecurities. Grace hated how everything was unfolding. The elegant clothes the stylists brought didn't feel like part of who she was. Logan insisted it was necessary, that she needed to adapt to be noticed. But the more he talked, the more she questioned. Noticed by whom? "You need to stop thinking like the old Grace," Logan said in a tone that bordered on disdain as he looked into a framed mirror in front of her. "The fashion world isn't kind. Either you fit in or you get crushed." Grace stared at him through the mirror's reflection, her eyes shining with indignation. "What if I don't want to fit in? Can't I just be myself?" Logan chuckled softly, but there was no amusement in his tone. "Being yourself isn't going to save your bakery." She knew he was playing dirty, preying on her weaknesses. Grace felt like she was fighting on two fronts: the fear of losing everything she had worked for, and the pressure to become something she wasn't. Questions swirled in her mind. Who was Logan, really? Why was he so determined to change her? What did he stand to gain from all this? During one of the many sessions, when they were alone, Grace decided to confront her thoughts. "Logan, I know there's more to this than you're telling me. Nobody offers help like this without a hidden agenda. What's your real motivation?" Logan turned slowly, his expression slightly tense. He was used to controlling every situation, but Grace was starting to challenge him in a way he didn't expect. She was seeing beyond the surface. For a moment, his eyes betrayed a hint of vulnerability, but he quickly masked it with a cold smile. "Why do you always have to question everything? Can't you just accept that I'm offering you an opportunity anyone else would kill for?" Grace crossed her arms. "You don't know me, Logan. And if you want me to go along with this, I need to understand what's really happening, because right now, it feels like I'm just a pawn in some game you're playing." Logan took a few steps closer, getting near enough for Grace to feel his imposing presence. He looked into her eyes as if trying to gauge how far she was willing to go. "You want to know the truth?" he whispered, his voice filled with a tension she didn't expect. "I'm a businessman. Yes, I make bets, and you're part of one of them. But it's not just that. There's something about you that's different, something I can't ignore." Grace blinked, surprised. That admission, coming from someone like Logan, felt out of place, almost as if he was struggling against something within himself. The sincerity in his words left her momentarily speechless. "And what exactly is that something?" she asked, wary but intrigued. Logan stepped back, as if he had said more than he intended. His face hardened again, and the controlling man resurfaced. "That doesn't matter now. What matters is that we're in the middle of a process. And Grace, if you want to save what's left of your bakery, you'll have to trust me." Trust. That word felt like an insult coming from Logan. How could she trust someone who had admitted that everything started as a bet? Yet there was something in his confession that felt incomplete, as if he was still hiding more. Grace knew Logan wouldn't reveal everything at once. He was testing the waters, gauging her resistance. In the days that followed, Grace continued with the process, but now with a new perspective on Logan. There was something beneath the surface that he wasn't willing to expose, and it kept her on edge. While the physical transformation continued, a quiet transformation was happening inside her. Grace was determined to uncover the secrets Logan was hiding, and that kept her in the game. During one of those sessions, as the stylists made the final adjustments on one of the outfits, Grace noticed something peculiar. Logan usually kept his distance, watching from afar, but at that moment, his gaze seemed distant, almost worried. She caught him looking at his watch, as if he were counting down to something. "Do you have an important appointment?" she asked casually, testing his reaction. Logan blinked, turning his attention back to Grace with an almost uncomfortable expression. "Nothing you need to worry about," he replied quickly, but Grace knew there was more to it. He seemed anxious, a feeling she had never seen in him before. The mystery of Logan was starting to unfold, and Grace realized that this wasn't just about her or the bakery. Something bigger was at play. And now, discovering what it was had become Grace's main motivation. What was Logan really hiding? And why did he seem to be racing against time? Grace was becoming more aware of the changes around her. The external transformation Logan had started was in full swing, but something much deeper was happening inside her. She began to question her own life, her choices, and what she truly wanted. But one thing still bothered her: the secrets Logan was clearly keeping. Even with all the discomfort the physical transformation brought, Grace couldn't deny that she was beginning to see her own worth in a new way. It wasn't about the clothes or the makeup, but about the strength she was discovering within herself. A strength that Logan, in some way, was helping to reveal, even unintentionally. But this newfound confidence came with doubts about Logan, his motivations, and his secrets. One afternoon, while she was trying on yet another series of outfits, something unexpected happened. Logan was watching from a distance, as he always did, but his expression seemed different, more vulnerable. His eyes didn't carry the usual disdain or coldness, but rather a kind of silent admiration. Something he likely didn't want to show. For a brief moment, Grace realized that maybe Logan was just as lost as she was in this situation. After the session, once the stylist had left, Grace, unable to contain her curiosity, approached Logan again. They were alone in the bakery, the atmosphere quieter than usual. "Logan, I need to ask again, what do you really want with all of this?" She said bluntly. "If this were just a bet, you would have grown tired by now. There's something more, and you know it." Logan looked away for a second, something that wasn't typical for him. Usually he faced everyone with confidence, but now he seemed to be struggling with his own emotions. Finally, he sighed, crossing his arms. "Grace, there are things you wouldn't understand right now. I'm not exactly who you think I am." Grace felt a chill. What did he mean by that? It was the first time Logan admitted so clearly that there was much more at stake than just a simple bet. "Then make me understand," she pressed, stepping a little closer. "You can't keep playing these games without giving me answers. If you want me to trust you, you need to start being honest." Logan stayed silent for a few moments, as if weighing how much he should reveal. Then, in a lower tone than usual, he spoke. "This bet, it's not just about you, it's about me too. I made this bet because I needed to prove something, not to others, but to myself." Grace watched him closely. There was sincerity in his words, but also an emotional weight she hadn't expected. For the first time, Logan seemed less controlled, less like the Iron Man he had always portrayed himself to be. "Prove what?" Grace asked, with a softness in her voice that surprised even her. Logan looked directly into her eyes, something he rarely did with such intensity. "That I can still change. That I'm not just the person everyone expects me to be." The silence that followed was heavy. Grace didn't know how to respond to that confession. She had always seen him as someone impenetrable, but now, standing before her, was a man fighting his own inner battles. "You think you're transforming me," Grace began, carefully choosing her words, "but maybe I'm transforming you too." Logan let out a low laugh, more from nervousness than humor. "You're more right than you realize, Grace." What did he mean by that? Grace was growing more intrigued, but at the same time, she sensed she was treading into dangerous territory. The closer she got to Logan, the more she realized he was hiding something big, something that might even hurt her in the future. In the days that followed, their interactions changed. The coldness between them began to fade, and there were moments when Logan seemed less like the fashion mogul and more like a man dealing with his own insecurities. He no longer treated her as just a project. There was a growing respect between them. Grace was starting to see beyond the facade Logan so carefully maintained, but that also scared her. The closer she got, the more she realized how much of an enigma Logan was. One evening, while they were working late during yet another fitting session, Grace broke the silence with a question that had been on her mind for days. "Logan, have you thought about what you'll do after all this is over? After the transformation?" Logan paused for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the question. I haven't thought much about after." Grace gave a slight smile. That's a lie, and you know it. Someone like you always has a plan. Logan looked at her for a long moment, then turned his gaze toward the window. The silence between them grew thick again. Maybe the after isn't so important, he finally said, but there was something in his tone that suggested otherwise. Grace knew he was avoiding the truth once again. There was something big, something he was hiding, and she was determined to find out. Logan was becoming more human to her, but that didn't erase the secrets surrounding him. Grace understood that the transformation wasn't just about her appearance or her bakery. Logan was fighting an internal battle, and she was beginning to realize that, somehow, she was part of that struggle too. In the weeks that followed, unexpected changes unfolded for both Logan and Grace. The relationship, initially built on a superficial bet, began to evolve. Grace, with her authenticity and inner strength, disarmed Logan in ways he never imagined. For the first time, he didn't see someone as a project to mold, but as a real person, with dreams and fears that he was starting to value. Grace, on the other hand, felt her emotional barriers starting to crumble. Despite her suspicions and the secrets still surrounding Logan, she couldn't deny the connection that was forming between them. There were moments when she saw an unexpected vulnerability in Logan, something that touched her deeply. Yet, a part of her knew he was still hiding something big. One evening, after a long session of fittings and discussions about the next steps in the transformation, Logan and Grace were alone in the bakery. The intimacy in the air was palpable. Logan, who always kept a professional and distant demeanor, was now standing close, his eyes fixed on hers in a way that made her shiver. "Grace," he began, his voice soft but laden with something more. I think I need to tell you something." Grace felt her heart race. For weeks, she had been waiting for this moment, a chance for Logan to finally be honest about what was happening between them. But before he could continue, the sound of heels echoing on the wooden floor interrupted the delicate atmosphere. The bakery door opened, revealing a tall woman with sharp features and a cynical smile that immediately put Grace on edge. Amanda. She entered as if she owned the place, her eyes locking onto Logan with a mixture of disdain and something darker. "Logan, darling, I'm surprised to find you here," Amanda said, her voice dripping with venom and sarcasm. Logan stiffened. Grace could feel the shift in his energy instantly. Whatever was happening, Amanda was a ghost from Logan's past that he clearly didn't want to resurface. "This isn't a good time, Amanda," Logan said coldly, but there was a hint of tension in his voice that didn't escape Grace. Amanda let out a bitter laugh and turned to Grace, looking her up and down. "So this is the famous Grace Wilson, Logan's little bet. He never talks about his projects, unless they're touching something deeper." Grace frowned, sensing the provocation in Amanda's eyes. "And who exactly are you?" Grace asked, trying to keep her composure. Amanda gave a calculated smile. "I'm someone who knows the real Logan, and if I were you, darling, I'd stay far away from him. He has a habit of destroying everything he touches." Logan stepped forward, positioning himself between Grace and Amanda. "That's enough, Amanda," he said, his voice hard. "You don't belong in this part of my life anymore." Amanda ignored Logan and kept her sharp gaze fixed on Grace. "Has he told you what he did to your family, Grace? Did he mention how he was responsible for their downfall?" Grace's world stopped. Amanda's words hit her like a punch to the gut. She looked at Logan, searching for answers, but his silence and the dark expression on his face confirmed the worst. "What is she talking about, Logan?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "What did you do to my family?" Logan ran a hand over his face, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Grace, I didn't know your family was involved until after I accepted the bet." Grace took a step back, the ground feeling like it was collapsing beneath her. "What do you mean? How were they involved?" Amanda, savoring the moment, gave a cruel smile. "Your dear Logan here was involved in a financial scheme years ago that ruined several families. One of them was yours. He helped manipulate your father's company's debts, driving him to bankruptcy." Grace felt the air leave her lungs. "This can't be true," she whispered, feeling the tears welling up in her eyes. She looked at Logan, desperate for him to deny it, to say it was a lie. But he didn't. "Grace, I found out after I took the bet," Logan finally said, his voice filled with regret. At first, I didn't know. But when I started looking more into you, I realized your father was one of the investors who was destroyed by a series of bad decisions. Decisions I helped manipulate. Grace shook her head, unable to believe it. My father lost everything. He died after that. You destroyed my family, Logan. Logan took a step forward, but Grace raised her hand, stopping him. I never wanted that to happen, he said, his voice filled with pain. If I had known, I would have done everything differently. And when I found out who you were, I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, afraid to tell you the truth. Grace was devastated. Everything she thought she had been building with Logan, the trust, the connection, now felt like a lie. You knew all along and tried to hide it from me? Amanda? Watching the scene unfold, smiled. He was just trying to save his own skin, like he always does. But Grace, the hole goes deeper than you think. There's more that Logan hasn't told you. Grace looked at Amanda, confused and terrified. Amanda laughed darkly. Oh, sweetheart, you're just scratching the surface. Logan isn't the man you think he is. He's cruel and destroys everything. Grace turned to Logan, her eyes filled with pain and desperation. What is she talking about? What are you still hiding from me? Logan tried to speak, but he hesitated. He didn't know how to tell her everything. The silence in the bakery was heavy, almost unbearable. Grace stood there, staring at Logan, the man who had been responsible for the destruction of her family. Amanda's words echoed in her mind, and everything she believed about Logan now felt like a cruel lie. The ground seemed to crumble beneath her feet, and the heat of anger mixed with the pain burned in her chest. You knew all along that it was my father, and you did all this just to use me. Is this part of your plan to destroy what's left of my family? To destroy me and my family's bakery too? Logan lowered his head, unable to meet Grace's pained gaze. Grace, please, listen to what I have to say. I know I made terrible mistakes. I know what I did was unforgivable, but in the beginning, I didn't know who you were. Only after I took the bet, when I started looking deeper into you, did I find out what had happened. Grace crossed her arms, her hands trembling with rage and hurt. And what did you do with that discovery, Logan? Decide it was easier to keep deceiving me, pretending everything was fine while hiding this secret? What else are you hiding from me? Logan sighed, running his hands nervously through his hair. He knew this moment would come, but he had never imagined how hard it would be to face the truth. He hesitated, but he knew he couldn't keep running from it. Your father, Logan began, his voice low and filled with guilt. He came to me before everything fell apart. He was desperate, Grace. He begged me for help. He knew his company was sinking, that he had made some bad decisions, but he believed there was still a chance. He asked me to help him rebuild, to save what was left of your family's business. Grace blinked, unable to believe what she was hearing. Her father had asked Logan for help? The same person who had destroyed him? And what did you do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Logan closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his guilt crushing him. I ignored him. At that time, I was so focused on my own interests, so blinded by success, that I decided your father's bankruptcy was inevitable. I let him sink. I could have helped him, Grace. I could have done something, but I didn't. Grace felt her heart break all over again, as if the ground was collapsing beneath her feet. Her father, the man who had always been her hero, had begged for help from the very man standing in front of her now, and Logan had simply ignored him. He had let her father be destroyed. You let him die, Grace said, her voice trembling with a deep, raw pain. My father died believing he was a failure. He died ashamed of what had happened to our family, and all of it was because of you. Logan took a step forward, guilt etched into every line of his face. Grace, if I could go back and fix everything, I would. I never wanted this to happen, I swear. When I got closer to you, everything changed. I realized what I had done, and I regretted it deeply. But Grace didn't want to hear his excuses. She was shattered. Everything she had built, the bakery, her relationship with Logan, now felt like a cruel lie. She felt betrayed in a way she had never experienced before. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said, her voice broken. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you without remembering what you did to my father, to my family. Logan tried to step closer, but Grace moved back, keeping her distance. Grace, I understand what you're feeling. I know you have every reason to hate me, but please, let me try to make this right. I don't want to lose you." Grace shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You've already lost me, Logan. I trusted you. I started to feel something for you. But now, all I see is betrayal." The tension between them was palpable. Logan was desperate for Grace to give him a chance, but the pain she felt was so intense she could barely breathe. With every word he spoke, the weight of everything that had been revealed became more unbearable. "I know I hurt you," Logan continued, his voice strained. "But I'm willing to do anything to make up for my mistakes. I just need one chance." Grace turned away, trying to find some shred of strength to handle it all. She knew Logan was trying to make amends, but the pain of his betrayal was still too much. She didn't know if she would ever be able to get past what he had done. Before she could respond, Amanda, who had been watching the scene with a look of satisfaction, interrupted once again. "Grace, don't be naive. Logan hasn't changed. He's always been like this, only thinking about himself. Do you really think he's sorry? Or is he just trying to salvage what's left of his own reputation?" Grace looked at Amanda, feeling the anger rising inside her. Amanda had been involved in her family's downfall somehow, and now she was reveling in Grace's suffering. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Grace said, her voice full of bitterness. "You knew what Logan had done to my father, and yet you took advantage of it. Why are you here now? To rub salt in my wounds?" Amanda laughed, a cold and cruel sound. "I'm here to open your eyes, sweetheart. Logan was never the hero of this story, and now you know just how low he can go. But remember, he's not the only one to blame. Your father had secrets too, secrets that Logan hasn't told you yet." Grace turned to Logan, her heart racing. "What else are you hiding from me?" Logan closed his eyes, knowing he couldn't hide the truth any longer. "Your father, he made one last deal with me. He offered everything he had left to try to save the bakery, but I refused. I thought it would be better to let everything sink for good." Those words were the breaking point for Grace. Her father had begged for Logan's help, offering everything he had left, and Logan had simply ignored him. He let her family be destroyed, and now she had to live with the guilt of never knowing. The pain was overwhelming. Each day seemed to drag Grace deeper into a pit of sadness and disappointment. She tried to go on with her life, but wherever she went, she felt Logan's presence like a constant shadow. He had shattered her trust, broken her heart with devastating revelations, and now she wasn't sure if she would ever fully recover. In the weeks following the revelation, Grace avoided all of Logan's attempts to reach out to her. He had called countless times, left messages, but all she wanted was distance. The thought of hearing his voice, of facing the man who had ruined her family's life, was unbearable. Yet the silence was painful too. The conflicted feelings of still caring for him, mixed with the betrayal, kept her in a constant state of anguish. But Logan didn't give up. On a rainy morning, Grace was locked inside the bakery, trying to keep her mind busy with orders and preparations. When the sound of loud knocks on the door caught her attention, her heart raced. She knew who it was, even before she looked. Logan was there, standing in the rain, completely soaked but determined. His eyes, usually full of control, were now marked by desperation. "Grace, please, listen to me," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Grace hesitated for a moment. Part of her wanted to just send him away, but another part, a part she didn't want to admit, still wanted to hear what he had to say. She opened the door just enough to let him know she was there, but not enough to let him in. "I have nothing left to hear from you, Logan," she said, her voice cold but with a hint of pain she couldn't hide. Logan stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "I know I hurt you, Grace. I know what I did is unforgivable, but I can't give up on us. I made mistakes, and I'm trying to change, but I need you to give me a chance." Grace shook her head, tears threatening to fall. "You destroyed my family, Logan. That's not something I can just forgive and forget." Logan took a deep breath, struggling to hold back his own emotions. "I know I can't change the past, but I can make a difference now. Since you've been gone, I've been trying to do something that matters. I'm trying to be a better man, not just for me, but because you made me see that I needed to change." Grace stared at him, her heart torn between pain and the desire to believe he was truly sorry. "What are you talking about, Logan?" Logan looked at the ground for a moment before answering. "I've been helping a homeless shelter. They needed help, and I realized I've always lived so focused on my own interests that I never stopped to think about those around me. But you, Grace, you made me see how wrong I was. I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness. I'm trying to redeem myself." Grace stood in silence, trying to process what he was saying. She hadn't expected to hear that. Since she'd known him, Logan had always been the type of man who only cared about power and success, never about others. And now, he was talking about helping people in need? Part of her wanted to believe he had changed, but another part was still too hurt to accept it. "I don't know if I can trust you," Grace said, her voice soft but filled with pain. Logan took another step forward, desperately trying to connect with her. "You can come with me, Grace. See for yourself. I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I just want to show you that I'm trying to do the right thing, even if it's too late." Grace felt a tightness in her chest. She wanted to push him away, but something inside her held her back. There was a small hope, a spark that made her want to believe Logan was telling the truth. But she didn't know if she was ready to take that step. "This won't erase what you did," Grace said, her voice firm, trying to protect herself. "I know," Logan replied, his voice almost a whisper. "But if I can do something, anything, to show you that I'm trying, it's worth it to me." Grace felt a wave of emotions wash over her. She didn't want it to be this way. She didn't want to be torn between the pain of betrayal and the hope that Logan might really be changing. But there he was, standing in the rain, asking for a chance, and Grace knew she needed more time to process everything. "I need to think," was all she could say before closing the door, leaving Logan outside, with the rain still pouring down on him. In the weeks that followed, Grace kept her distance from Logan, but she couldn't get his words out of her mind. She learned, through mutual friends, that Logan was indeed dedicating himself to helping the shelter. He was providing food, donating his time, and even funding projects to improve the conditions there. Grace didn't want to admit it, but it touched her. She was still deeply hurt, but seeing Logan trying to be a better person stirred something inside her. Maybe he was really changing. But that didn't mean she could simply forgive everything that had happened. One day, while walking through the park, Grace saw Logan talking to some people who appeared to be volunteers from the shelter. He was smiling, interacting in a way she had never seen before. He looked genuine, and that confused her even more. Logan saw her from a distance, and his eyes lit up. He waved but didn't approach, respecting the space she clearly still needed. Grace watched him from afar, feeling a mix of emotions: hurt, hope, confusion. She still didn't know if she could forgive him, but seeing how he was trying to change planted a seed of doubt. Maybe he was more than the man who had destroyed her family. Logan, on the other hand, was devastated. Every day was a struggle, trying to prove to himself and to Grace that he had changed. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he was willing to do anything to rebuild what he had destroyed. He felt Grace's absence like an open wound, but he understood that the trust he had broken would take time to heal. He kept showing up at the shelter, dedicating his time and resources, hoping that one day Grace would see him as the man he was trying to become, not just the man who had hurt her. He didn't want to lose the one person who had made him see beyond himself. Grace knew that, at some point, she would have to make a decision. She didn't know if she could fully forgive Logan, but something inside her urged her to look at him differently. Was the change she saw in Logan real? She didn't know. But with each passing day, she felt the weight of the decision approaching. And when she was ready, she would have to face everything that was still to come. The days since Grace and Logan's last encounter had been filled with introspection and reflection. Grace was torn. The pain she felt was still deep, but something inside her, a faint flicker, made her believe that maybe Logan had truly changed. He had hurt her heart, destroyed her family, but now he was trying to redeem himself in a way she had never thought possible. That afternoon, Grace walked to the park, the same place where days earlier she had seen him helping people from the shelter. She was there again, but this time with a different purpose. She wanted to see him, to understand what was really happening inside her own heart. With every step, she felt her chest tighten, as if she were about to make a decision that would change everything. When she reached the park, she saw Logan from a distance. He was helping a group of volunteers distribute food to people experiencing homelessness. Grace watched in silence for a moment, seeing how he interacted with the people. He seemed genuine, different from the man she had known months ago. The Logan standing before her now was someone with empathy, someone who seemed to have understood the impact of his actions. Logan saw her from afar. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, everything stood still. He handed out the last food bag and slowly approached, respecting the space he knew she still needed. When he was close enough, he stopped and spoke in a soft voice filled with regret. "Grace, I don't know what to say except to apologize once again. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but everything I've done since we've been apart has been to try to be a better person. And if you can never forgive me, I'll understand. I just want you to know that you made me see what truly matters." Grace took a deep breath, feeling Logan's words resonate deeply in her soul. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but this time, they were different. Not just tears of pain, but of relief. She finally found the voice to say what she had been holding back for weeks. "Logan, what you did, it hurt. A lot. I won't deny that. I thought I'd never be able to trust you again. But I've seen you change. I've seen what you've done for these people, how you're trying to do something good, and part of me wants to believe that people can change." Logan took a step forward, but stopped, his eyes locked on hers, filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Grace, I just want to give you what you deserve. If I could spend the rest of my life proving that I'm a different man, I would. I never wanted to hurt you, and if I could go back and change everything, I would." Grace looked at him, her eyes still full of tears, and finally took the step she had been so afraid of. She moved closer, standing just inches from him. "I believe you, Logan. I've seen you change. But I also need you to know that, while I forgive you, forgiveness doesn't erase the pain. It just allows me to move forward." Logan nodded, his eyes welling up with tears, unable to believe the words he was hearing. "Grace, I promise I will never give you a reason to doubt me again. I love you." The words left his mouth almost like a whisper, but they were filled with so much emotion it felt like the world had stopped around them. Grace stood silent for a moment, surprised by the intensity of what she had just heard. But in her heart she knew she felt the same. She looked at him, taking a deep breath, and with a soft smile she said, "I love you too, Logan." The words were simple, but their impact was immense. Logan took a step forward and finally embraced her, as if afraid she would disappear if he let go. Grace felt the warmth of his embrace, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. Even after everything that had happened, their embrace was full of forgiveness, love, and the promise of a new beginning. Grace knew things wouldn't be perfect, but she also knew they were ready to face the future together. A few days later, Logan took Grace to the shelter. As he had promised, she saw firsthand the work he was doing, helping people who, like her, needed a second chance. The way he interacted with them, with empathy and care, showed that he had changed deeply. Grace felt proud of him. The man standing beside her now was completely different from the man she had known at the beginning of the bet. He had become someone capable of love, of caring, and of making a difference in people's lives. After spending the day at the shelter, Logan and Grace walked together through the park, holding hands, talking about the future. They knew the path wouldn't be easy, but they were willing to walk it together. They had overcome so much: hurt, betrayal, pain, and now they could finally look forward with hope. As the sun set on the horizon, Logan stopped, holding Grace's hands firmly. "I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you, Grace. I know the past can't be erased, but I want our future to be filled with love and happiness." Grace smiled, her eyes shining with the promise of a new beginning. "I believe in you, Logan, and I'm ready to start again." They looked at each other for a moment, and Logan leaned in to kiss her softly, a silent promise of everything that was to come. That kiss sealed not only forgiveness, but also the love that had grown between them through so much pain and redemption. Finally, they were ready to start again. Together. And what do you think? Was Grace right to forgive Logan? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know what you think. Your participation is very important to us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thank you for watching.